Hey, it's Robert Clickybeard, the host of the Commercial Landscaper podcast. These podcasts challenge you to grow as a leader, to stretch yourself beyond your comfort zone, and to 10x your company. I really encourage you to enjoy the show, share it with teammates, fellow business owners, and subscribe. That helps us grow our community. Hi, this is Robert Clickybeard with the Commercial Landscaper podcast. Really excited today to be joined by Ed Jensen. Ed, thank you for joining the show today.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Ed, so for our benefit of our listeners, could you maybe spend a few minutes just talking about your background in the industry and what you enjoyed doing there?
Recently retired, but I started my career quite a while back in working for at that time, I would call them a small to mid-sized landscape company. The name was Clark Morrell. Stayed there about 5 years, and when I left, I was an account manager. So I started off getting dirty. We're digging the holes, running the weed eater. And then when I left, I was still young and learning, but I was an account manager nonetheless. After about 5 years, I had an opportunity to switch directions, still in the landscape industry, but I went to work for an Atlanta-based commercial real estate developer, Ackerman and Company. At the time, they had a brokerage department, construction, property management, security, residential real estate. And I had what I, in hindsight, found as a pretty interesting role. My job was to babysit the landscaping on all of their holdings, which was about maybe 6 or 7 types of properties, from office park to some condos, some retail. So I saw it from a coat and tie perspective. I saw why it was important that the landscaper forgot to remove the dead bush by the front door of the management office. And it was about 5 years. And then I sort of saw the economy was ticking downward, and I felt like my position at the time was sort of a luxury position. There weren't a lot of those roles. And I, maybe rightly or wrongly, I was going to choose my head to be on the chopping block. And right around that time, Tommy Medlock, owner of OLM, approached me. I found but his approach to consulting was interesting, and I felt like the timing was right for me to jump into it and see how that would do for my future. And 37 years later,
oh wow,
with one company, I'm a unicorn. I get it. But I stayed with them and learned a lot. But background I had led me to that.
Right.
I got a degree in horticulture from Clemson, and then got dirty. Then I, had my nails manicured, and then I got into the consulting thing, and it was really a lot of personal and professional growth, traveling around the country. I had a one-off trip to Brazil, which was interesting. March 31 this year, I stepped back, and now I'm enjoying time with the wife, the grandbaby, the dog, some traveling, and I still feel like I've got some information I'd like to share with the world if there are those that want to listen.
Talk about the scale of the company. You came obviously from it was a smaller portfolio. You were looking after, I think you said 6 different types of properties, but it sounds like the property you spent 37 years at was a bigger portfolio of maybe even multiple clients. Just talk through that scale.
When I joined OLM, testing my memory, but Tommy was at a point of adding a big chunk of work, and he could just like all small entrepreneurs, he did everything himself first. Right. And then he said, this thing is no longer a concept. It works. I need help. And,
right.
I took that opportunity. But anyhow, back in 87, 88, the company, we probably did monthly site inspections on, maybe 50 properties.
Okay.
We grew that in addition to adding people. There was a point maybe 10 years ago that we were doing over 400 monthly monthly site inspections. Obviously I didn't cover all of those, but we had work as far away as Denver, Dallas, Boston. We're all over Florida. By the way, if I switch verb tenses, current to past. I no longer have anything to do with OLM, but anyhow, so we've done work in Nashville, Minnesota. We short-term did some work in Sacramento. So we, over the years, a small company, big footprint.
No, that's awesome.
Yeah, we've yet to hear of any consulting group that does that many site inspections.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, and Robert, again, tell me if this is something you want to hear, but real briefly, what OLM does, boiling it down, we did two things. We wrote standards and specs, performance payment-based standards and specs for a property, and then we helped the owner collect the bids and help guide them to a rational decision on who to use. That was one part of the service, and then the phrase we always use is, you can have a set of specs as thick as a phone book. If no one's managing them, they may or may not get done.
Right.
So our role, it was full key. We not only help them define the services that are needed for that property using real world experience, and then on a monthly basis, like clockwork, we would come kick the tires, make sure that the details are being done as set forth in the specs.
Yeah.
And to be clear, Robert, people think that we're the typical consultant where we come in and tell you how to run your business. We set good industry standard parameters and then say, you do it. You think you've got the best recipe for green grass. That's all we're asking for.
Right.
Fescue in October, it should be green.
Right.
So anyhow, that's pretty real simple. And then monthly basis, we walk the property, drive the property with the customer, the ops manager, and kick the tires. Are the weeds in control? Is the turf being appropriately maintained? Is the irrigation properly managed? The flowers look pretty.
Right.
And then on the hood of the car, we had I don't know if you've heard of our grade sheet. We would grade the work, and if they passed the inspection, they would get all their money. If they failed the inspection, they'd lose 25% of their monthly bill.
Oh wow, okay, that's a good chunk of money.
Yes, it keeps them accountable and gets their attention. We don't want to take their money. We never got paid based on, hey, for us to afford OLM, you need to fail them twice a year.
Right.
That's not the case. We want a good relationship. We created more turmoil if the property was a mess.
Right.
And we've seen that. So.
Yeah, so you weren't necessarily coming in and saying, you're an agronomist or some other plant health expert that comes in with all these fertilizer recommendations. You were just giving more of a general overview, and if they wanted to dive a little bit deeper, they could potentially hire, somebody local to fix some of the issues with their grass or their shrubs. Is that correct?
Yeah, it didn't happen that often, but
right.
Again, what we learned real quick early in our company's career that if you were to specify, in the spring you need to use a starter fertilizer with 18-3-8 formulation with slow release nitrogen, and in the summer iron based. How do we manage it? How does the owner? I mean, we'd have to be sitting there in a lawn chair watching the company bust open the correct bag of fertilizer, properly calibrate the spreader, properly spread it. And we learned real quick that contractors didn't like it, and we'd be there for hours. Bottom line, we just said, hey, it's I'm looking at my lawn, it's Bermuda, it's green. I don't care what they put on it. And contractors appreciate it because we all think we're all cowboys. We all think we got the best recipe for green grass. We say, great, do it. We build in 5 apps a year, 6 apps, whatever the region may call for. Say, we want for you to make money on this.
Right. So, I'm sure there's probably some listeners thinking, why do they need this extra level of expertise to oversee properties? Because, in theory, if in theory, you hired the right contractor, they should be able to produce, they should be able to self-manage a property, report issues, and you hold them accountable. You can still have that, hold their money back if they're not performing, but there obviously must be a reason why some management companies obviously felt as though there was a need for that sort of that middle person.
Heard that question a lot over my career. OLM gets hired for lots of different reasons. And probably the largest one is there's this niggling doubt from a property manager that, am I getting what I'm paying for?
Right.
I chose this company, maybe they're middle number, high number, and they came in with the pretty presentation and said, hey, we're the best. You need to use us. And then maybe there's here and there a hiccup in the service, and they created this little bit of doubt. They learned about OLM, and it's like, wow, I don't have to be out there knowing what properly pocket pruning a shrub is.
Right.
I don't need to be out there guessing if they properly and timely sprayed for nutsedge. And there's a service we market ourselves as a support service for the property manager. So it's a lot of different reasons that we get hired. And not a large reason, but sometimes we get hired because the customer flat out isn't happy and they need a reason to change, and they, for whatever reason on their side, they feel like they want a third party to guide that change. And we didn't never like to advertise our service like that. We get the work, we start the inspections, and if the contractor is good or even remotely good, they'll do the work.
Right.
And if they don't, and we've seen it all. We're at a property one time where we'd been there a while, show up, and here's the marquee entrance sign bed, half, maybe 200 square foot flower bed, half the flowers, Robert, and I think it was a
Wow.
summer inspection, were dead.
Right.
They're dried basil hanging on the stem, and you're wondering why we're being hired. Here they have to fly me in from Atlanta.
Right.
And shame on the property manager for not raising hell. Shame on the crew leader for not ringing the bell and saying, hey, I need help here. Shame on the account manager for not seeing that. Shame on the branch manager for not being in touch with his portfolio work. And I'm sitting there, I remember like it was yesterday, I'm failing the snot out of them and deer in the headlights. This is passing to you? Here the customer spends extra for a flower bed to draw favorable attention to the property, and half of it's dead, and it's anyhow.
Yeah. No, that's so true. I mean, you actually bring up a really good point. I had a very similar conversation this morning that, when you actually think about it, you've got a minimum of 3, 4, 5 sets of eyes on a property, in theory, on a weekly basis. Between your crew of typically 3 people, you might have an irrigation tech out there. Maybe you might have an ops person. Maybe you have an account manager. So you've got all these different people who have eyes on a property. That shouldn't, in theory, be any excuse for them to miss half-dead flower beds, or the main entrance into the building having issues, or a tree branch broken and fallen down or something. But, if you're all, again, engaged on a property, you're buying into the company culture, then in theory, there shouldn't be any excuses.
And we internally within OLM, we constantly be reminding one another that when we fail a contractor, it's not intended to be malicious intent. We found that it actually kept the contractor out of trouble.
Right.
If, same example with a half-dead flower bed, if OLM wasn't involved, what happens if like a regional high-up muckety-muck from New York City is touring the property and he sees that? Can you imagine the turmoil that it could have? Whereas we nip it at the bud, there's accountability. They got their wake-up call, now fix it. And usually the good companies say, yeah, this sucks. But no, it didn't meet our standard either. We'll take care of it. And then usually from that point forward, we're talking about, the wife, the kids, football, baseball, vacations. Right. Oh, by the way, spot check your weed schedule. Got some nutsedge here. And the inspections are not a problem. It's when contractors fight what's going on. And that's when we sort of shake our head and say, you're getting yourself into trouble. Just do it. It's not a problem.
Not rocket science.
Yeah.
Both of you and I have seen a lot more software involvement with properties. That many of them have their own inspection systems. You've got Aspire, you've got Boss, you've got Element, you've got Landscaling. How have you seen that evolve in actually allowing or helping to manage properties?
I've given that thought. You could take pictures of a sewage treatment plant and make it look like Augusta National. And so there's part of me has a little bit of a skeptical thing. Every company has that, and it's better than nothing. Don't get me wrong. They're working hard at trying to create a quality control system, which is very important. But there's been times where I've seen, they put together half a dozen photos, representative shots of the work they did that visit. Good stuff, but it's like, great. You go around the corner and, it's hey, they're paying. The analogy we always used to use is, the customer's buying the full car wash, not just the front hood.
Right. That makes sense.
And so it's great that you got the front lawn really detailed, nice, but this back easement is important as well. You're being paid to do it.
Right.
You bid the work to do 100% of the property. So it's, our job is to make sure that the car gets washed totally, not
Right.
just partially.
We both know that, we could probably go to 95% of the properties out there and we'll find some issue with it. And maybe we put it on our punch list or put it on our issues list or something, but where the rubber meets the road is actually gets done. The work gets completed, and then ideally, then the client is communicated with, say, hey, Mr. Client, we did the work, everything's good now. But often that's the missing piece right there, is that feedback loop. What have you seen as being, I suppose, the most successful?
Well, I can't speak to all of the individual program like the Aspire and all the others that you mentioned a few moments ago, but the term I use is you have to close the loop. The customer maybe complains about bad pruning, and you say that my crew will take care of it by Friday. And then sometimes, you hope it's done by Friday.
Right.
So to me, it's as simple as using one of those systems and bullet pointing it out, sending an email or however the system works back to the customer and with a quick picture. Yes, we took care of that issue you had with the pruning at the main entrance or whatever it was.
Right.
So and I'm trying not to ramble here, Robert, but property managers are overworked just like your standard operations managers. And there's times I've observed that the property manager rolls their eyes and go, oh, God, I got to talk to this landscaper again. So the ops manager needs to read the room and learn, do I call her or is an email with a picture enough?
Right.
And you have to learn how not to be intrusive, but responsive, if you know what I mean. And I see a lot of times, when you go into a property manager's office, their desk is just littered with spreadsheets and things they got to do. And, oh, yeah, I forgot I raised hell with him about bad pruning at the main sign. And oh, geez, it's done. I don't need to talk to him, but the ops manager feels obligated to talk to him.
Right.
Good on him or her. It's constant communication loop.
For sure.
You got to do that.
I would always promote, if I'm doing account management training or something, I would always say, how can you make the client's job easier? Because typically they have a portfolio to look after. And when you think about it, they're not just looking after landscaping, they're looking after parking lots, they're looking after janitorial and everything above. So, how can you as an account manager make their job easier and, simplify it, whether it be photographs or just simple communication. So that makes a big difference. But moving on to, I want to make sure we cover this. What are some of the common mistakes you see landscape companies make?
Made a few bullet points in no particular order. It can be everyone in the landscape world pushes efficiency. Obviously you don't want to take 3 hours to do a 2-hour job, but there's times in my experience I've seen folks being in a hurry and not methodically doing the work. And that's the constant training that a branch manager, a business owner, an ops manager needs to do with a crew. So, one of the points would be they're being in a hurry and not being systematic and methodical. Too many excuses. There's sometimes you just need to humbly say, my crew screwed up. This is how we're going to fix it. And we'll have it corrected by Friday.
Right.
And sometimes, I perceive that the hardworking guys in the trenches, I'm just not going to tell anyone, and I'm just going to see if I can let this slide for another week, and cringe that every time the phone rings from that customer. And that sort of goes hand in hand with accepting bad work. And that's a large reason why OLM gets hired. I've lost track of how many times I've seen, customers say there's bad pruning at the entrance. And then the term I use, and the crew goes on, they just whack shoots. The shrubs have no relation to the sign. They're overgrowing the window, but they're pruned. Well, they're pruned badly. And it's so somewhere in the assembly line of landscape, I think there's a deficiency of training where the account manager, the business owner needs to convey to the team, no, this is the correct way to prune this shrub. I remember we used to talk in our office, we could wave a wand. We wish we could throw away every pole shear and weed eater. And, the art of pocket pruning, selective pruning, soft touch pruning, not many companies have that skill anymore. It's shear it. Hey, we know we got this job because we're low bid. Let's shear it and hurry up and get out of it, not knowing that a properly hand pruned shrub through the course of a year probably gets touched less than a hedge that has to get sheared every 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah.
The other thing is a lot of times, and again, I'm generalizing, Robert. There's a lot of good companies out there, so I'm hoping the listeners here don't think I'm singling them out. It's like my company doesn't do that. Companies present themselves as perfect when most property managers realize that you're juggling a lot of balls, from weather to labor to equipment malfunction. As long as you make an honest, good faith effort to communicate and correct deficiencies as quickly as you can, with or without OLM's involvement, property managers will accept that. But
Right.
I see a lot of times, just the excuse game starts, and then the customer gets a negative perception of ABC company, and maybe it was just the wrong person in the wrong seat of the bus.
Let's take a minute to thank our sponsors. Urcher is a life brand born from grit, founded by Zach Strausser. The mission is clear: to raise $1 million for the trades by supporting vocational training across North America. Urcher makes tough, smart gear built for landscaping and snow professionals who work hard outside every day in all conditions. Their apparel puts safety first, helps crews look sharp, and honors the pride in their craft. Every purchase has purpose, fueling training programs and building a resilient workforce. Urcher isn't just workwear, it's a culture of respect, resilience, and results. When you contact Urcher, mention Wilson 360 and Zach and his team will take well care of you. That brings up a interesting point, and I actually observed this morning. I went out and did a couple of site inspections myself, and it brought up the question, how often do crews get enough direction going on to job sites? One of the things I was a big fan of was doing the whole quadrant theory, where you're splitting the job up into maybe 4 different quadrants, and maybe you're focusing on a quadrant every single week. You're still doing a full view of trash and other things, but I feel many crews or companies don't necessarily, there's no direction given to the crews, especially in larger properties, where they're trying to figure out how do you get through that property and deal with what the priority areas are on a particular quadrant.
Well, that's where you separate the men from the boys.
Right.
The good companies with good depth of resources have that, whereas a lot of the companies that don't, they just rush around, and like I commented earlier, just being in a hurry. The customer's not happy with pruning. Well, maybe it's 2 bushes and not the whole property.
Right.
Many years ago, I had an inspection on a small property in Northern Virginia, and then I'd show up, and one of the first questions we'd always ask, hey, how'd things go this month? Part of OLM's job is being marriage counselor. And the property manager was standing there, and the ops manager, well, John called and said they're having a big VIP visit, and they wanted to make sure we make it look good for the visit next Thursday. So I took my schedule, and I instead of a Friday service visit, I rearranged everything to be a Wednesday visit. They pruned everything. And the property manager looking at, there's just two little piles of leaves at the front steps. It's like, it's like,
It was blown up of all proportion.
yeah. Well, how about asking the right? What do you feel we need to help you present the best image for this property for your visit? Everything's good. Just get those leaves cleaned up. Hey, he could have hopped out of the truck and fixed that himself. And so again, it's a lot of just learning how to communicate and convey questions and information. Circling back to your question, if I remember, is like the training. The crews, they way back when, was we call it a tailgate training. As they're getting ready to roll out of the shop and say, "Don't forget to trim the suckers on the cream myrtles." The crew knows that they need to mow, edge, blow, but it's the other details. So when you get on these big jobs, you come about quadrants. That's as good a starting way as any. The only negative is in growing season, some plants grow faster than others. So you've got to be prepared to circle back on an Elaeagnus hedge or whatever it might be. So that's where, again, the role of the account manager is to see that and then know how to communicate that. Robert, also goes back to properly bidding a job. When every company bids a job, in my opinion, they don't know whether it's the right number until the year's over, after you've had a full cycle of seasons. Hey, we got the job. Maybe your estimator made a big mistake that no one caught. Now you got to eat that for a year. Or you don't have you don't have the hours in the job to deliver what it is. So now, as a company and organization, you've got a decision to make.
Right.
Do I whine and complain, which no property manager wants to hear? They more than likely they went out on a limb to hire you. Maybe they had to make a change from a long-standing business relationship. They go through the bid process and they like you. And they have to go to their boss and say, "Now, tell me why you want to fire ABC company. They've been with us for 10 years. And so we think this other company, they've got nice trucks. They've got nice brochures. And they went out on a limb to hire you. So you have to make a decision. Am I going to eat that mistake? And in my view, the answer is unequivocally yes. And the next bid cycle,
yeah, that's exactly what my theory was, is that, we all make mistakes, but, follow through on them. And I think you brought up a really interesting point that I don't think anybody's brought up before, but, if they've gone out on a limb to hire you, especially if you are a newish company, or maybe you've just got onto their bid list, you've got to go in and prove yourself. And then as you've build that trust, whether it be 6 months or a year, then you can maybe go back and introduce it to your, in your conversation, your walkthrough. But eat that cost. Maybe you can make up a little bit of money on, proposing enhancements just to make up some of that margin. But no, I'm 100% on board with you. While my head is there, how can there's obviously a huge amount of activity in the M&A space right now. A lot of companies being sold. I see a lot of new companies coming on the scene. They're learning quickly through listening to podcasts like this or other sources. But what are ways you've seen on newish companies trying to break into developing a relationship with somebody like a CB Richard Ellis or a Cushman or something like that are well established, that many people can feel as though they're in this ivory tower and they're untouchable?
From the owner's side, Robert, they chatter and chirp about the mergers and the buyouts and all that. The company I've cut my teeth on, Clark Morrell, I'm sure you've heard of them, maybe not, but
yeah.
Briefly, they went, I think I'm correct in this timeline, they went from Clark Morrell, they split to Morrell Group, then Omni bought them, then Valley Crest bought them, then Brickman, and then Brightview. So they've been, and I remember having managers in my last year of retirement, man, I wish Morrell Group was still around, and it's, so these companies, the property managers chirp and chatter about, these big companies, are they getting the better service? So in my last year, we found that there is a big opportunity for, generically calling them small and the mid-sized companies, local players.
Right.
So if they have an opportunity, you have to develop a reputation as being all those good Boy Scout things, reliable, honest, fair with your pricing. If you get your toe in the door, don't stumble. Try to, the old classic phrase, meet and exceed expectations.
Right.
A phrase I remember hearing, I remember using it every other month, was you're only as good as the last time you cut the grass.
That's so true. And that's why people don't like maintenance compared to like a, construction or design build, because they can move on, but it's constant with maintenance.
Yeah, you can, oh yeah, fix that mistake. Well, guess what? That shrub's going to need pruning again in another month. Are you going to
Right.
have it pruned before they tell you, I'm pruning that section of shrubs again?
Yeah.
The other thing is, in the world, sadly, price matters. I mean, it's the days of companies taking high bid and bragging about it are slim and none. So these smaller companies, they need to learn how to bid as competitively as they can. And yeah, I get it. You want to make profit, you want to make good margin, you want to meet numbers for reasons we all know. If a small company submits a careless bid and say it's either ridiculously low or ridiculously high, the property manager from their ivory tower is going to say, well, we gave them a chance, but I'm not
Right.
sure what we're getting. Here we either got a company that underbid it and is leaving some possibly important details that won't get addressed, or maybe they are super high expensive, and I'm going to go to them and they're an unknown. I can't go to my higher ups and say, hey, I'm going with a small company and they're real high. So they need to learn, the companies need to learn how to bid as competitively as possible, whatever that means to you. I know there's a lot of software estimating programs out there, and they're all good, better than I remember my history pricing 20 jobs in 4 hours.
Right.
And I mean, it was driving. Yeah, that's about it's a little bit bigger than that one. We get 300 a month, three and a quarter.
Right. Yeah.
In hindsight, it's like, how crazy was that? It didn't even
Yeah.
measure turf and beds and that kind of thing. So, I think I would emphasize that a smaller company needs to learn how to bid correctly. If a job takes three men 3 hours to service, don't bid it at 2.
Yeah.
You need to bid it correctly and get it as close to accurate. And again, I get it. You won't really know till after the first year when you really go through your financials.
Yeah. But at least my theory was, let's make sure at least there's enough hours. I mean, if you want to be competitive, then you could maybe squeeze the margin a little bit.
Right.
The
Right.
gross margin, but make sure there's enough hours for the guys or girls to be successful. So that was almost my theory, just to change direction, because I know we're running out of time here. But once you have that job, how important is that onboarding piece? We talked about communication, we talked about expectations. What should that look like in that first walkthrough, or that first 15 or 30 days, just to set you up for success?
One of the first thoughts I have is be agreeable. You don't want to start out your first impression being argumentative, making excuses before you've even had a chance to make a mistake.
Right.
So I would suggest always be accommodating and agreeable. One other thing I remember coaching companies on is sometimes property managers would only do an OLM inspection maybe twice a year, maybe 4 times a year, and I'd tell these people, find an excuse to give them something. We're not talking about giving them the whole patio, but maybe there's one chipped piece of flagstone at a walkway leading to a smoker's area. Even if you're lying, say, hey, we got an extra one from a job and another thing. It's just sitting there. I think it'll fit right here. Let me bring that out and put it in there for you. Hey, I know you got a big visit. Let me add 5 bales of pine straw to the front door area here.
Right. Right.
Yeah, and just make it painful for the customer. Make it painful for the customer to not like. If you do those little things, it's built up over a period of time. The customer's going to go, they've helped me out of a jam a bunch.
Right.
And so I would always suggest trying to be accommodating where you can, make them feel like the customer's getting a value, doing something. And again, I want to stress, I'm not saying people are not doing that, but I have observed little hiccups that happen.
Oh, for sure. And it always happens. always happens. I mean, whether you're people short or weathered or something. Ed, I know we're wrapping up here. Was any last parting words? And then how do people get in touch if they want to chat more with you? And obviously you've got so much depth of knowledge there. What's the best way for people maybe just to, get in contact with you and see if they have any other questions?
Probably message me on LinkedIn.
Okay.
I think that'd probably be the simple way. I know we could talk for hours, but one thing I'd like to quickly insert, may not make the edit, but sadly in today's time, price is so huge, and I'm not advocating becoming a low bid company. You always want to be the right bid, but there's the pressure. A lot of times I see it's the annual contract renewal or biannual. Everyone feels pressured to, hey, I want to get a 3% increase. Everyone knows the economy, that kind of thing. Every property managers understand that, but did you do anything to deserve that increase? Again, perception wise.
Right.
So it's, mother notes, budgets matter to owners. Things are all the same. They're not going to do it. But, before you go in there and say, hey, I did a great job. Look how nicely I put stripes on the lawn. Can I have an 8% increase? That may or may not fly.
No, that's so true. And one of the things I suppose I teach is any price increases shouldn't be a surprise. I mean, that should be a constant conversation.
Yes.
Starting in, June even, as because a lot of people do their budgets in maybe July, August. So, drop that into the conversation.
Yeah, just remind them, hey, just like you feel the pressure at the grocery store, and educate the customer on, it's not only this that's going up. Our suppliers, guess what? The flower pots, they're made out of petrochemicals.
Right. Yeah.
And that's gone up. So they're passing that increase on to me. And so I agree with that. And the other thing is like customers need or contractors, I feel, need to look long term, not short term. Too many times I see companies, they got to make money that month. It's very important, but would you rather cut corners one month to make a number, annoy the customer because you didn't meet a standard, and then at the end of the year, behind your back, they're rebidding and they're choosing another contract? Now you got to replace that contract.
Yeah,
and,
that's costly.
Yeah,
that's costly. Yeah, no, I agree with that. I use sports a lot, and a lot of the things I compare sports and business, and I talk about the long game, and you've got to run that marathon rather than the sprint. So I 100% agree with you. You just got to play that long game.
And you can't predict when. I remember my last year, out of nowhere, I got a call from the customer. Hey, you're losing this one building. What? I didn't even know it was up for sale.
Right.
The thing, I don't remember. It was $30-40 million property. It went on the market and sold within 90 days.
Oh wow. Okay.
And so it's like a contractor can't predict it. So all of a sudden, and then this new owner comes in. Maybe they got a long-standing relationship with someone else, and they just, hey, we're firing them, we're retiring them. We like them better.
Yeah, so true.
And you can't predict that. Your numbers go askew for that quarter.
Right.
Yeah, anyhow, we talked for a long time, but
yeah, well, let's get you back on, Ed. Again, you've got so much knowledge to share. I mean, I think we could easily do 2 or 3 different episodes and pick different topics. So let's maybe plan get you back on in another few months. People can contact you through LinkedIn, but I say I really do appreciate your time today, your knowledge. I think this is great insights into not only existing companies, mature companies, to be able to manage their properties better, communicate more with their clients, but for those up and coming companies, learning how to maybe get into that commercial space, or maybe try and find a CB management property or something else. I think you've got some good insights there.
I believe that should be the goal. I think every landscaper knows that there's a hierarchy of properties. Single home, single family is probably the worst.
Right. Or apartments maybe.
Well, that's stepped up to number 2, and then maybe condos 3, then HOAs 4, and then commercial office. The good stuff is the holy grail.
Yeah.
But you got to have a mix, but it is a fascinating business that I was glad to be a part of for a long time.
Oh, awesome. Ed, again, absolute pleasure. Thank you for your time today.
Yes.
And we'll keep in touch.
Great. Thanks again.
Thank you, Ed. Take care.
All right. Bye.
That's a wrap for today's episode of the Commercial Landscaper Podcast. I hope you're walking away with some great nuggets that you can immediately apply to your business, whether you're in leadership, operations, or you just want to show up every day with that Ironman mindset. Remember, growth doesn't happen by accident. It happens with intentional moves, bold conversations, and surround yourself with the right people. If you found value today, subscribe, leave a review, or share this episode with others. And again, don't forget to check out wilson-360.com. We have digital courses from account management, operational excellence, leadership development, or some of the other coaching packages we offer. Anyway, huge shout out to our sponsors. Thank you very much. And I'll leave with this. Have a pure, dead, brilliant day.